Hey folks, James Caton here. A very quick introduction to today's episode. Today we speak with Ed Bobrin at E&Y. We talk about the value that Agentic AI brings to stitching together the many enterprise applications that exist across the landscape. We also talk about how Agentic AI is causing customers to rethink their centers of excellence and focus more on orchestration across agents and achieving business value. I really enjoyed having this conversation with Ed. I think you will enjoy listening to it. And as a reminder, this conversation is part of a series of interviews that we are publishing as a Microsoft AI Transformation Playbook. The link to download that playbook is in the show notes. If you enjoy these kinds of conversations like I do, share this episode with a friend. Give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform or video platform. Listen on. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today we have Ed Bobrin from E&Y talking to us about Agentic AI. Ed, good morning.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Doing well. So tell us a little bit about yourself so folks have context on where you're coming from with your perspective on industry and agents, etc.
Sure. So, just a little context. I've been here at EY for about 4 years, been working in the Microsoft ecosystem for close to 13 years and consulting for close to 30. So it's a big number. Um, in my current role, I lead our AI and data practice for our Microsoft Technology Alliance. So my focus is 100% on how our clients that have embraced the Microsoft ecosystem can, get value out of the AI and data platform technologies that Microsoft's bringing to bear.
Excellent. And that is really timely. You're in a good spot. We're in a good spot in the industry with all of the AI conversations happening today. What are you hearing from your customers on agentic AI?
Uh, I think curiosity, caution, um, excitement, a combination of like a lot of different adjectives that come to mind right away, right? Like uh, the pace of which agentic has come through is kind of blowing everyone's mind. We thought Gen AI was fast, right? Over the course of its hype cycle over 12 months. This is like less than a third of that, and we're knee deep into it. Customers are trying to assess what their capabilities are, what the risks are, but they're also very excited about the opportunities that it's presenting them, right? The ability to you know augment their workforce with agents that actually can think, right? It's something totally unique.
Um, so it's early-ish, right?
Yeah.
In this agentic era. Um, can you walk us through an example of a customer that is already doing something with agents and how they view it as potentially transformational to how they do business?
Yeah, I think about, there's a lot of customers testing waters right now, right? One is just figuring out what are the right tools I should be using. I think in the case of Microsoft, we're together in a good position here in terms of how Microsoft kind of has a well integrated framework around agentic, right? There's a lot of tools out there, and if clients look at best of breed, it gets a little more complex to try to figure out. So that's kind of slows the adoption a little bit. Given that we have kind of a holistic ecosystem, it makes it a little more digestible in terms of getting started. And I think about some of our clients, and actually, I think contextually about like a more of an old school AI project that now you can kind of push forward into an agentic use case, right? So we've solved, um, you know, operational and supply chain predictive maintenance problems with traditional AI for our manufacturing clients for years. I did a project when I first got here that talked about optimizing, scheduling on the plant floor, taking into account, scheduled maintenance, unplanned maintenance, and other logistical concerns that they need to be able to adjust to adjust the supply and to clients that have a backlog of orders out there, right? In the past, we could use, optimization models and traditional AI models to do predictive maintenance and inform a human to go maybe schedule a ticket or implement a plan for a service window, if you will. Now we can layer on agentic onto those same use cases, our ability to go back to clients and say, look at the value we drove, just a couple of years ago, and how can we exponentially bring that forward by now taking that same approach and saying, okay, well, we know when you should be doing maintenance. We no longer need a human to schedule it. We can have that signal passed to another agent that can do the scheduling on your behalf, or hand it off, let's say from an agent you built custom, let's say in Azure, to an agent that sits in ServiceNow because you're using that as your service platform. So the ability for agents to start to work autonomously and reason and hand off gives the ability to exponentially improve that process cycle, right? And reduce time of downtime and increase the ability to respond to customer changes, right? But I should say supply changes. Customers have a demand out there and you need to meet it, right? And there's sometimes penalties for that. So the more you can lower that risk of a penalty by working through these challenges you have day to day, that's a huge win for our manufacturing clients. So that's where I've seen us using traditional AI and customers now moving into the next step of saying, okay, well, how can I take what I started with even just a couple of years ago, apply agents or agentic AI meaning agents that are working autonomously, not just single agent use cases, and start to actually improve the whole cycle, right? And have much more capability and control over how they serve clients.
Yeah, well, the vision I'm getting from what you've just described is, for example, that junior employee that comes in and tells you, FYI, right? This is what's happening. This is what you could do.
Yeah,
And, the senior person, will look at them and say, well, go do it, go fix it. So, the agentic error is kind of like that employee that'll actually go do and fix things rather than just coming up to you and saying, there's a problem. Maybe you should know about this, and then stops there.
yeah, yeah. And I think in the early days, um, I think there's still because of the kind of caution and skepticism of just general trust of agents and LLMs, and the need for, obviously the governance and validation of that capability. People are still trying to, keep human in the loop where it makes sense, just to, build that confidence and muscle until they feel like, okay, that we've reached a point where the capability of a reasoning agent is so well grounded in the data that I'm providing it, my historical knowledge, that it's like having that 50-year employee, that 30-year employee that used to have all the tribal knowledge in their head is now like educating the LLM, educating the agent, right? So that that ability to absorb that information, which used to be very difficult when you were transitioning to a, a younger workforce, or new people coming in, whatever the scenario was, is now, like, now you can actually build confidence because being able to connect agents to your data is, it's much easier now than it was even 6 to 8 months ago
Yeah.
with some of the new technologies around agentic.
So there's two major aspects of agentic that are new, right? One is the reasoning, the ability to think through something. And then the second is the ability to then act upon it, right? So there's like two new things, right? The reasoning and the action. As customers take a look at those two new key areas where they should be thinking about automation and AI, um, where are they seeing um, these agents really as an opportunity to deliver value to customers? What use cases do you see rising to the top in your conversations with customers?
I think there's a few different ones. Some are very like sector specific. When you think about, I spent a lot of time in the life sciences sector, right? If you think about, you know, automation of tasks in a lab in the research and development side, that's an area of focus, for that sector where they can actually take some time out and actually give time back to the scientists to really focus in on their analysis. Some of that entry level task of moving data around, synthesizing it, analyzing it, the capability of an LLM today can function very much of what a data scientist did before in terms of finding features and patterns in the data for you, right? So it accelerates your ability to start making some decisions and around product development and so forth as an example in sector. We look more like commonly cross-sector opportunities. We talked a little about supply chain as a perfect opportunity that kind of touches all different sectors, right? Whether it's distribution and consumer, right? Or manufacturing and operations, like I talked about before. And then, of course, a common, you know, use case right now, easiest to consume is really the transformation of the finance function. It really crosses all different sectors, right? The ability to look at a value chain in the finance area and look at where you can apply AI, where you shouldn't apply AI, and then how much of that can be automated with agents. How much time can I put back into the finance function to be more strategic about how they're operating and helping their company grow, as opposed to the task oriented activities of moving postings around and making sure invoices are getting marked for payment and receipt and categorized. And I think one of the most interesting and important things around agentic is that there's a reality that every software provider is going to build agents in their foundational platform, right? There's not a need for an EY or other consulting firms or even clients themselves to build an agent to do everything under the sun, right? So these software companies are going to be delivering agents that do work within their kind of domain, right? Like I just use SAP Finance as an example, right? They're going to build agents in SAP. Our focus should be how do we connect the agents that move data outside of SAP to those agents so they can take that handoff and do the execution within SAP. We don't need to reinvent those agents, right? We don't want to inundate our clients with, hey, we build a better agent that does X, Y, and Z in your enterprise resource planning system. No, those agents should be able to tackle that more natively. We should be focused in on the communication, the agent handoffs between those systems. I think that's where EY and Microsoft can add value to companies that are have a very vast, diverse set of application ecosystems that they really need to stitch together. And that's a big advantage of what we can bring to the table, as opposed to trying to build an agent that does everything, right?
So this goes back to the core expertise, the core value proposition of advisories and integrators, right? We're able to look across the many business functions and business systems that you've got, and we're able to look across the agents that, the ecosystem of agents that each will be bringing to the table, and then extracting additional value by breaking down those silos.
Absolutely. And I think the other piece of it where I think we can offer advantage and strength is recognizing an agent or an application, Gen AI application or an agent. It could be either or an evolution of one to the next. In one industry, it could have wide applicability to other industries, right? Recognizing the fact that the pattern can be reused, right? The content may be different, but the pattern it makes sense in a lot of different contexts, right? So being able to create a pattern around a certain type of agent, for example, and kind of catalog across sector where they make sense to be leveraged is something that we are really focused in on to bring to our clients, and right to really have a library of that capability and recognize where it makes sense to if we look at a credential, we get often asked, right, like in the sales cycle, well, show me where you've done this before. And it's got to be relevant to my industry. you have to be able to connect that dot. Like I built it over here in life sciences, but if you break down what the capability is, it applies to, right? Manufacturing applies to any service industry, right? I'm speaking abstractly, but the point is being able to recognize that and explain it to clients that the pattern is what's important, that it solves that same contextual problem you're trying to solve, even though it might have actually originated in a different sector, right? There's
Yeah.
value to be had across sector.
And, you know, speaking of patterns, are you seeing customers start with internal use cases on Agentic and then with customer facing? Um, is is that the pattern that is repeating itself with Agentic?
I think I think it's a mix. I think the short story is that as they're building, customers are building confidence. Yes, it's easier for them to take on an internal task. It feels like less risk,
Mm.
right? If you're not going to expose something to the client. But you know, what we're finding more is the focus is more of an offensive stance on this, and how can I use agentic to drive more value, to drive revenue, not so much. It's not all like in the beginning, Gen AI was like, oh, it's all going to be cost takeout. That's going to be the story of the day, productivity and cost takeout. And I'm not saying that's not an opportunity. It certainly is an opportunity, but we're seeing clients think differently now and saying, well, how can I use this technology to improve marketing, to improve product development, to improve content development? So there's a bit of a shift there, and I think it depends on the type of client and how um, forward thinking or aggressive they may be about whether they're taking that kind of defensive or offensive stance and how they're going to use the technology.
So you actually got a little bit ahead of where I was. What one of the questions that I was gonna come into, and you've already landed there, is how are customers thinking about agentic as far as enabling new revenue streams in their industries?
Well, I think what we've seen uh, with some of our customers, and I kind of talked about this in generally speaking in my last response was we've seen it used for innovation and product development, right? We've seen it specifically. I had this conversation with one of our AI leaders a couple weeks ago in preparation for an AI community event where marketing function is using it to better forecast their their ad spend, getting ahead of what used to take a lot of time to get back from an agency, for example, right? Like the feedback on how an ad did, right? You can do so much simulation and uh, forecasting capability is now built into some of the technologies and capabilities within the LLMs that are specifically kind of grounded in your environment, grounded in your data to actually be more aggressive around your marketing function, but not and being less reliant on potentially waiting for data from an agency. So it's being more proactive in getting in the market, right, to drive revenue faster.
So as you take a look at customers and partners in general, many of them have already invested in the creation of a COE, a Center of Excellence. How are they having to rethink that for agents? Is that causing a rethinking of the skills and the focus and the strategy behind a COE?
Yeah, when you think about like clients that started an AI COE, it was most likely started around model development, data science, getting the data together. If they're doing optimization, getting the right algorithm in place, all those things around not so much just traditional AI, but even generative AI kind of model selection has been a big topic of discussion, right? 2 years ago we were talking about which version of ChatGPT or Hugging Face or Llama model they should be using, a big kind of general purpose LLM. And I'm not downplaying that capability, but if you look at like Azure AI Foundry today, there's over 2,000 models. And when you talk about agentic, every agent could be using a different model. depending on what its task is, right? You have to really, the thought process around which model I should be using is like, you know, it's like 10x the thinking you had to do before, right? When you think about multi-agent autonomous workflows, you got to think one model is not going to solve all those problems. You need agents that are doing reasoning. You're using X model. You need something grounded in your data for execution. It may be a different model. So now it's really thinking about the COA needs to think about orchestration. How am I coordinating these things to work together, right? Not just the infrastructure, the technology. There's so many choices out there. Being able to really come down to what's the right framework for governance for a set of agents, right? Could be different depending on what that agent's task is. So multi-agent architecture, the process design around it, a landing zone for different types of agents. These are a whole different mindset from, hey, what model should I be building? What are the pipelines that are, getting my data ready for AI is still a foundational thing you have to do, whether it's traditional AI, generative AI, or agentic. Getting connected to the data is different now in agentic than it was even 8 months ago in Gen AI with MCP and open protocols that make it a lot easier for LLMs to connect to data and get grounded. All of that is new learning for everybody, right? So skilling up, obviously, very clear responsibility for the agentic COE. The pace in which we have to skill our own people to be able to serve our clients, it's mind-boggling. Like we have to we're constantly trying to get ahead of that, right? So COEs need to evolve. Just client COEs, our COEs, we all have to evolve to that new technology very quickly. And there's always seems like there's a big push and pace to not to be first, but to be part of this new kind of paradigm. But again, caution and caution is still there, right? You still make sure you have the right guardrails in place for this. So the COE needs to still have that focus as well.
The upskilling, you touched on that for a minute. How's that changing? We talked a little bit about the technical staff, but the sales staff are also going to have their conversations differently given agentic. So how are those conversations changing? How is the upskilling and enablement of those two communities, the technical, but also the salespeople?
Yeah, for us, I mean, it does change. I mean, there's definitely an evolution happening on customer expectations around how firms like EY deliver services to them, right? They expect us to be using AI in all different aspects of our delivery, right? And part of that is, okay, is it a shift to, if you're saving tons of time using AI, then, then my projects must be getting less expensive, right? But that's how so it's a big shift on more thinking about outcomes and value as opposed to time and materials, right? It's a shift in thinking. And so what are we bringing to bear to get you to the outcome, faster, better, right? And then let's look at how does it make sense to fund this project, right, based on those types of things. So that's definitely a shift in that pattern of what customers' expectations are in terms of what we're delivering. It's table stakes for you to use Gen AI to do assessment work and develop your backlog of user stories. I mean, if the client's not demanding it, they will be very shortly if they're not already doing it. But we're coming with those tools. We're showing what it used to take if we were doing things kind of, I'll call it the old-fashioned way, but what the old-fashioned way could have been 12 months ago. My point is, like, we're accelerating, right? We have to shift to value because what we maybe did in a year before that we can do in 6 months now could be generating twice the value that your long project took, right? And that's opportunity for the client and opportunity, obviously, for the service providers that are delivering the value to them. So we have to shift about our thinking as well.
Yeah. So I heard billable hours, and I heard if you save me this much, a value based or performance based. Is there an IP, an agentic IP based our customers thinking about it from that perspective as well. I'll license that agent and just pay you a fee on the agent.
I'm sure that mindset is out there. We're we typically when we build typically in our business the way we were working when we build IP to accelerate client engagements all the time. We've been doing it for
Hmm.
years and years. And as long as we're implementing that technology for the client, they have a right to use that IP in perpetuity. Like we
Hmm.
may deliver something and they can continue to use that even after we're gone. Only they can use it for that particular use case. And that's typically what we do. We're we have a whole side of our business that we do managed services and we monetize IP and host applications in tax and audit and those types of practices and technology consulting. A lot of times we're building IP to accelerate that client's value proposition that we're the problem we're trying to solve, and we're typically not licensing it for sale. Like we're not monetizing it. That's how it historically has been. Could that change in the future? It could, but and I go back to the comment I made earlier, like everyone's going to be building agents, right? Every software provider a company is going to deal with is going to be building their own agents. It's going to be a all around who can play in between and connect these ecosystems the best, right? How can we get, and you think about clients that are, you know, working across multiple hyperscalers, right? They're balancing their risk. They have assets in AWS, assets in Microsoft and Google. Everyone's got agents, agentic frameworks. It's they need to be able to start to talk to each other, and I think we already see that those conversations happening between the big players out in the cloud space. That there needs to be openness. Microsoft's been very good about building on the fact of on open source and open protocols, right? They're leveraging MCP, which is developed by Anthropic, as a standard in Azure AI Foundry for orchestration or connecting to data, like
Hmm.
for agents. I think that mindset of being open is important, and I think it's our role now to figure out the landscape of our clients and how we best connect those systems together to deliver more value to them. It's not, again, don't reinvent the agents in those core applications, but fill in you know the opportunities in between those systems to make sure that you're really delivering an orchestrated agentic experience that's bringing more value to the client.
Yeah. Um, Ed, you and us, right? We live in this world. We live and breathe agentic. Um, we know it. We're comfortable in it. For customers that are just now starting the journey into agentic, any advice that you have for folks that are stepping into this and really thinking about doing something and going down the path that you've already gone down?
I think obviously due diligence is an important part of what you're doing. I think that's where partners are really valuable, like coming in and leaning on an advisory partner to make sure you're covering your basis in terms of uh, preparedness, right? Data is key. We have this conversation all the time. AI is useless without foundational set of data, right? It seems redundant to say it as often as we do say it, but is making sure the foundations there is a key point, regardless of whether it's traditional AI or agentic AI. But building the guardrails, I think, and I'm not saying, hey, put the brakes on and go slow. Just be thoughtful about your approach. There's no special awards for saying you did it all by yourself, right?
Hmm.
Right. It's okay to lean on partners to accelerate and build the confidence. I think there are obviously companies that want to do things themselves and they'll hire those skills, but it's not easy to find those skills, right? So building out those skills takes time. I think there's opportunities to lean into firms like ours to accelerate. That's something customers shouldn't shy away from. It doesn't mean we're there forever. I mean, we're building systems to collaborate with their own employees, right? the whole landscape is changing. How can we better enable your employees to do their jobs better? Not agents to replace them, but to collaborate with them, help you code, help you process claims, whatever it is that your role is. Those are things that we can help build. So again, I think it's just make sure you're. I think there's this risk reward. There's companies that have this kind of best of breed approach. I want the best application for orchestration. I want the best application for model decision making, which model I should be using. And all of those kind of best of breed approaches, they have benefits to them, but they also include a lot of complexity of integration, right? Sometimes if you want to get started more simply, working in a platform that has kind of the core already taken care of, right? And you can focus in on the value and the specifics around what you're trying to drive and not all the integration of that capability. Some of it's just connected together. I think that's what the ecosystem provides as a benefit. So I think balancing balancing those choices when you're going to take the leap into agentic is something to be considered, right? Like, will I get more value of best of breed, saying, this is the best orchestrator I could use, or do I get more value in doing deliver faster with kind of a platform that has a lot of that orchestration and capability taken care of that over time will evolve and support your needs longer term.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on this a little bit. You've been in the Microsoft ecosystem for a few years, and that's your focus at EY. Just to close out, could you talk a little bit about the value of that ecosystem, right? That you live and work in.
Yeah, I think I touched a little bit about this on the kind of the mindset that Microsoft has around being open. When I say being open, I mean from a technology perspective, it doesn't all have to be built here kind of mindset, like the adoption of open protocols, the openness to work hand in hand with their competitors, the reality. I think that shows one, I think, confidence in what they're delivering. That hey, we can partner up with um, NVIDIA is a big partner of Microsoft, right? They hardware partner, but and NVIDIA is also has complete competing AI platforms, but they work closely together and figuring out how together they can deliver to clients with alliance partners um, is critical. That ecosystem of two things: the openness piece and the fact that it's kind of enterprise wide, right? From desktop all the way to the cloud AI platform. Being able to bring all that value all the way down to someone sitting in Teams is a big part of the ecosystem. I think a lot of clients like that part of the ecosystem. That's something that I think when I was a customer back in the day, those were things that in my seat as an IT leader, when I was sat in that seat, I didn't want necessarily the easy button, but I wanted simplicity, because simplicity um, makes it easy. There's less chance of failure, all those types of things. There's a lot of things that you have to deal with, in your the clients deal with in their industries, challenges that we deal with in different ways around supply chain, geopolitical events, things that affect them every day. And if you can simplify your technology ecosystem in some way, and that's one less complicated matter you have to focus in on, I think that's important. I think the Microsoft ecosystem in general, around from a technology perspective, helps with that. I think the way that they work with alliance partners is key. I mean, we are our best client zero is EY. I mean, we do everything on Microsoft. We try to be the first one to do it and do it big, right? Like our Fabric implementation was probably one of the biggest at the outset a couple of years ago. Probably one of the biggest consumers of Power BI. So being able to lead with how we go to market with Microsoft is part of what makes being in the ecosystem fun. My best client story is always an EY story. Um, People like to hear other ones, obviously, than ours, but ours is usually pretty scalable and pretty important in terms of size and scope, and adds a lot of credibility. But again, I think the ecosystem, Microsoft's continued focus on being open, adopting, the right technology to be part of their ecosystem for clients is important. Not always has doesn't always have to be invented here, so to speak.
Yeah. I love the comment that you made about, uh, the Microsoft ecosystem simplifies the technology so that your customers can focus on the bigger problems.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, so Ed, thank you so much for your
Thanks. A lot of
conversation
fun. Thank
today.
you for having me.